to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your host, Buddy Sotello, Esquire, and Evan Ginzburg. Evan, would you like to introduce our guest for tonight?
Absolutely. We have legendary photographer and wrestling journalist, Dr. Mike Lano, out in Alameda, California. And we have all the way from China, not San Francisco's Chinatown, not New York's Chinatown, China, Steve the Teacher, who is a wrestler and a longtime friend of mine, who was trained in the Doghouse out in Brooklyn, from Brooklyn to China. How you doing, Steve?
He gets the long distance award.
That's right.
For 2020. You officially win. We had a couple, we had someone over in El Salvador, so he was in the lead, but now you way overtake him. So how are you doing tonight, Steve?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I will grateful for the long distance award. I apologize if there's any audio. Yes, I've known Evan for many, many years. In fact, I knew Evan before I had my first match over 20 years ago. And it was a direct result of Evan's recommendations and contributions that led me to my first match where everything just snowballed.
There you go. There you go. And we're going to talk to Steve later in the show. But right now, we want to acknowledge the tragic passing of Brodie Lee, Luke Harper, whatever name you want to go by. But unfortunately, he passed and 41 years old. And he was one of the few guys in WWE classy enough to acknowledge when Johnny Valiant died. So I always had a warm spot in my heart for this guy because he was a good human being and empathetic. And Mike, share any memories.
Oh, I got to ride with him from the hotel to, what was it, in San Jose, 2015, to the venue for Hall of Fame. So this was San Jose at the, it's like a Cliff Four Seasons hotel, and just real down-to-earth guy. This is shocking because you just told me a minute or two. I mean, I
just found out 5 minutes before the show.
Yeah, I mean,
you haven't told me, so that puts me even with less heads up.
Do we have a cause?
It was a lung ailment it was non-COVID related. It was a lung problem.
He had been off TV a good month, off AEW's Dynamite on Wednesday nights, TNT, maybe even longer than that. As part of that big faction there. So this was a tremendous loss for not just AEW, but wrestling overall. For a huge guy, so really down to earth, and it was amazing the stuff when I would take pictures of him at small house shows where WWE would allow us to shoot ringside. He was just so agile. He and his tag partner, after they did all that success in NXT, the farm system. But he had way more athleticism than WWE would allow him to show, and he finally, I think, was a lot happier coming to AEW. And that might have been his last match, the rematch with Cody Rhodes, which was a good 6 weeks ago. So this is horrible news in a very horrific year.
41 years old. Terrible.
All the potential in the world. Fantastic guy.
He was really sort of hitting his stride in AEW. They were letting him do the mic work that the WWE wouldn't let him do as Luke Harper. They basically made him as a crazy-eyed wild man when he was with the Wyatt family. And his Brodie Lee character was really giving Mike time and a chance to really expand on his ability to work a mic, which was pretty good. And the WWE never took advantage of it. And it's sad to see when he was really hitting his stride. How AEW is going to recover from this, I don't know.
Well, the wealth of talent and stuff, they make the best use of things. Where I've criticized WWE and even Impact, which used to be TNA, they would have guys on like Mick Foley. Mick Foley was a regular on the Jon Stewart Daily Show as the sports wrestling commentator. He was on there at least 5 times, and neither WWE or Impact TNA mentioned that And AEW, on the other hand, they're putting their guys, they had a bunch of their wrestlers. I'm sure Brodie Lee, Luke would have been part of this recreation of the Christmas Story movie. You know, they had a marathon yesterday, and they had all of their talent pretending to be some of the characters in that annual holiday movie. And I bet he would have been fantastic. He would have played a better Santa Claus than Chris Jericho. But I mean, serious-wise, this is just devastating, and it's devastating to me to hear about this so soon after Danny Hodge. And, you know, we've had some other wrestling deaths this week. It's been a very COVID horrific 2020, and we can't get to 2021 fast enough, and vaccines in the works.
Well, guys, why don't we also talk about the great Danny Hodge, who just passed. Yeah, Mike, if anybody has the expertise, it's you.
I shot him wrestling. Obviously, I don't have the stats, so I'm doing this off the top of my head. He was an 8-time NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. I shot him against Hiro Matsuda, Nelson Royal, Siegfried Stink, Jerry Brown of the Hollywood Blondes, several others. And that was just in the Leroy McGurk territory, which later Bill Watts kind of aggressively took over. Louisiana, Oklahoma, and some of the other ones. I think Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. Danny came in to help out Mike LaBelle in Los Angeles, my primary home base territory besides San Francisco, when LaBelle in around 68 was battling Vern Gagne, who came in for 3 shows to try to take over Los Angeles. He was at a snazzier building, the Lakers LA Forum, because Vern had partnered with the owner, Jack Kent Cooke, who owned the Lakers, the Kings hockey team, and of course the Forum. And Danny worked a couple of matches, I think against, one of those great Tennessee promoter guys, Buddy Fuller. He worked a match with Buddy Fuller I shot. And then he was on a Sheik's Detroit show in 73 when Sheik was battling Dick the Bruiser for supremacy. I mean, it was Sheik's Detroit, but Dick the Bruiser came in from Indianapolis, tried to take it over. He had actually a couple of years versus Gagne in L.A., and Danny was brought in when Sheik, Ed Farhad, asked Sam Muchnick, the NWA president, to send in the troops, meaning tons of talent from other territories.
Apparently, Danny Hodge was a real shooter. I mean, he was a guy who actually, if you did mess with him, he really could bring the punishment to.
Yeah, he's in that upper echelon.
From my generation.
Yeah, he's in that upper echelon with Thez, Vern Gagne, Billy Robinson, Bill Miller, Carl Gotch, Bert Asariti from the UK, Stu Hart, several of those guys. But he was the very first person on earth to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated twice, both as a decorated amateur wrestler, undefeated. I think it was 82-0 as a junior heavy NCAA champion, and then as an amateur wrestler. So he had stats and cred in both. And so the outpouring from the MMA community, besides wrestling and boxing, is just unheard of. Mike Tyson even came out with a statement today. So this guy was the toughest of the tough. And I rode with him a couple of times from different places to the Cauliflower Alley, wherever we happened to be, and actually walked down the Strip with him back in the early 2000s, the Las Vegas Strip. But he did have that great handshake, it was stronger than anybody else. And since he was like a teenager to just a couple of years ago before he kind of got Alzheimer's, he did lots of feats of strength, but he could take just the toughest apple and he would have you try to crush it in your hand first, and he could just crush it into applesauce. I think Evan might have seen him do that stuff.
Nikolai used to do that too.
Yeah. And there's a picture of him on his Wikipedia page of him doing it at age 80. He's crushing an apple. So he was apparently he said he had double tendons in his hands.
Oh,
yeah, he kind of double jointed. But I mean, whereas Thez was, when you think of the classic, the true NWA World Heavyweight Champion,
yeah, I remember
pretty much think of Thez. But NWA Junior Champion, you think of Danny Hodge. He was so classy, had that belt forever, and legitimately could be a policeman, hooker, shooter to take care of somebody that might, be trying to go against the promoter's wishes. Danny was just so trusted, but he was a very sweet, warm guy. Always had a big smile on his face. I'm looking at the photos that I have. He's I had him mock referee a match between Dr. Death Steve Williams and Neil Moskris, and I see him raising both of their hands in one of these photos I took. I posed him with everybody. Cowboy Dick Hutton, who was an NWA champion, Vern, Carl Gotch, Larry Simon, Great Malenko. Just that is a tremendous loss. I'm just going to throw out names. We don't have to discuss them so much, but in 2020, we lost Kamala, our friend James Harris. Evan and I had such a history with him. He sang and spoke. He broke kayfabe for the first time on the show Evan and I did together. Never spoke publicly before doing that. He actually sang on that show, and a couple other times we had him on. Johnny Rubberman, Mr. Wrestling 2 Walker, Bullet Bob Armstrong, Tracy Smothers, Hana Kimura in Japan. These are all tremendous names. We lost, like yesterday, too, besides Danny Hodge, A.C. Green, one of the greatest amateur basketball players, NBA champion basketball players.
Casey Jones,
I'm sorry.
A.C. Green is still with us. Unless
right.
he died and nobody let me know.
The year is still young, Russ.
Yeah, there's still time.
Buddy.
Yes.
This was Bill Russell's teammate in the SF State basketball in the 50s, and great champions. And then he was a coach for the Boston Celtics. Leslie West, amazing musician. How many amazing musicians did we lose this year? And
you didn't even get to Pat Patterson.
Oh, Pat, I didn't even mention Pat. Oh, I've got so many Pat stories and Road stories.
And Rocky Johnson. You didn't bring up Rocky Johnson.
Hero Furple. Rocky Johnson was Pat's world tag champion partner, and they were perhaps, most of us, I sent Meltzer some emails, I think they were Roy's greatest world tag champions, because Roy had a U.S. champion for singles, world tag champ, but Rocky Johnson and Pat, the battles they had with Shibuya and Saito and Blassie and Ripper Collins. And
that was just when I was growing up, was those battles where like Rocky Johnson and Pat Patterson were a tag team, and those two guys were over so huge in the Bay Area. Well, you remember because you were around here in the Bay Area.
I was there. I was. LA was my home base, but I would drive or fly up for all the great shows. Dave Meltzer lost his mother, who's a great lady, this week too, and before I could drive, she would pick me up at either San Jose or San Francisco airport, and Dave would be in the car. We were just kids then. We were like 13, 14, and she would take us to the Cow Palace, bring us back to their home, and then the next morning after she cooked breakfast, she would take me back to the airport. And but the reason for all of those, once Pat kind of got there, and even a little bit prior to that, Pat had put the bug in Vince McMahon Sr.'s ear to bring in a lot of the San Francisco great stars. Besides Rocky, Peter Maivia before him, Don Morocco, who Pat had some influence in helping turn heel in Florida and San Francisco. He mended fences with Vince Sr. and Mr. Fuji to bring Fuji back, and then he paired him with Masa Saito, who, of course, worked forever in San Francisco and LA with Pat, and several others. Jimmy Superfly Snuka, who his biggest success to that point before Mid-Atlantic was San Francisco as the lead face champion, U.S. champion. Pat, and that's, the Royal Rumble. I'm sitting there talking to the guy who introduced him. He called the other night. This is a fantastic, famous wrestler, wrestling's very first color commentator in the 60s in two territories at once, SF and LA. Pepper Martin in late 65, early 66. Anyway, he called me. We were talking about Pat for 2 hours the other night, but he referred Pat to promoter Shire in 66 and said, hey, this kid looks like a young Ray Stevens. You could pair him up, feud him. We've had all these sellouts all over Portland and parts of Washington State. And so Pepper Martin was the one who brought him in, and he kept in touch with Pat regularly. And he talked to Pat about 2 weeks before Pat died. And then Pat wasn't answering texts or phone calls from Pepper. And Pepper knew something was wrong. And so that's when he found out that Pat had been hospitalized. And Pat had told me many times when I would tell him as a dentist, hey, smoking and drinking are precursors to cancer and heart disease and stuff. You really should give that stuff up. And he blamed Ray Stevens, his partner, being on the road with getting him kind of hooked on cigarettes and light drinking, wine and stuff like that. I remember a great rib at Cauliflower Alley, must have been 88, where Sputnik Monroe, who...
Yeah, but Pat Patterson lived to age 78, which, when you talk about poor Luke Harper, John Huber, 41 you know, he couldn't make it past 41.
But Pat, if he hadn't done those bad habits, I know he would have lived longer. And but so Sputnik Monroe kind of was saying, "Hey, what are you doing drinking that Cosmopolitan? That's a girly drink." And you know, Pat explained to him he was a big fan of Sex and the City, the TV show. And about 5 minutes later, he snuck up behind Sputnik and poured a Cosmopolitan, full Cosmopolitan, over Sputnik's head. And Sputnik didn't get upset. You know, he could appreciate Pat was gay and stuff because the wrestlers never had a problem with it. It was really only the promoters. And he goes, "You should have put that in my catheter," meaning the drink, the Cosmo. Another time, another quick rib is we were at Moolah's annual convention in Vegas, Legends of Women Wrestling, and she was honoring with trophies Akira Hokuto and Bull Nakano, some of the greatest modern day lady wrestlers of all time, Japanese or otherwise. And they had their kind of uptight mothers with them and some big heavyweight representatives from All Japan Women. This must have been 93, 94. And Red Bastien, our later Cauliflower Alley president, is at the podium. And this was a less formal type convention than like CAC. And so he had Zubaz on. This is Red Bastien. He's talking in front of the audience. He's just like a foot or two in front of Akira Hokuto, Bull Nakano, and their mothers. And Pat goes right behind Red and pulls his Zubaz down, not thinking the underpants would come down. And Red's privates, everything was there. And Red and Pat were laughing. All the Gaijin Americans were laughing, but not the Japanese contingent. They were pretty upset.
Yeah.
That was the kind of
we lost the animal. We lost, you know, John Laurinaitis.
Right, Road Warrior Animal. Yes.
You know, that was another shocking, you know, loss to the community.
This has been terrific. Kamala's the only one we know for a fact because his family, thankfully, tried to help educate others that it was COVID. So he beat diabetes and all these other horrific things, near bankruptcy, which GoFundMe's helped resolve him from. And we have to lose a great man like that. Evan, how nice a guy was Kamala James Harris? He was super.
He was the sweetest guy in the world, and he was actually a very talented R&B singer, songwriter, talented musician. And he was an artist as well. I mean, just a eclectic, interesting guy. And yeah, very sad. It's been a tough year. Steve, how is it in China? What's going on there? If anybody would know, it's you.
Well, actually, I'm now experiencing my third wave of the virus. I was supposed to start a new job today, and that is not happening. I don't know when this is going to happen, but I did a show yesterday, or Christmas Day rather, and I'm doing a show next week. So it's kind of strange where certain things are inaccessible, but other things are still available.
So tell us about the promotion you work for.
I'm sorry, cut off. Can you repeat the question? I apologize.
Yeah, tell us about your promotion in China that you're working with.
Well, for the last year and a half or so, I've been working with Middle Kingdom Wrestling, which is run by Adrian Gomez, an American as well.
Yeah, I know Adrian.
And I started out, yes, except he thinks your name is Ginzburg. I have to keep correcting.
Yeah, that's okay. I've heard worse. Yeah.
I did what's called the Kingdom Rumble, which was their version of the Royal Rumble, a year and a half ago. I flew out to Harbin, which is the equivalent from where I was. I'm going from the Carolinas to Maine. I flew out. I did a 1-minute spot. I got eliminated. 3 or 4 months down the road, I went down to Shenzhen, which is the equivalent of going down to Florida. Did a 1-minute run-in before being tossed out of the ring. But now I found my way into the roster. I'm on the budget, so I'm not paying for the transportation anymore, and getting more and more opportunities. I had a title match the November show, and I even played Santa Claus this episode, which was kind of bizarre.
There you go.
Who are some of the other wrestlers, Ev? Who are some of the other wrestlers with Steve over there?
Well, it's very funny that you should mention that, because my first match 20 years ago in Brooklyn, which was arranged by Evan, by the way. Thank you. There was a gentleman in there by the name of Marcelo, who wrestled at that time as Pusha in All Murder is Legal. And then 20 years later, I go to China, and I see a gentleman in there who is wrestling by the name of Bufa. And it's the same person. So the first American dressing room that I was in, he was there. The first Chinese dressing room I was in, he was there.
We're losing your sound, Steve.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we're having some of the dreaded technical difficulties.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Steve. So we're gonna come back to you in a bit. But so, Mike, we lost a lot of people this year.
We did. It's been rough. I want to ask you guys what you think, and I hope wrestling fans, you see the examples of people wearing masks and all that stuff, and you hear that you shouldn't have your bubble, your family bubble that you see all the time, intermingle with others because that could become a super spreader. But my mother-in-law, who we protect, my wife takes care of her almost, daily, at least 5 days a week. Other family members who don't see her at all, they just insisted on getting together with her. And they said, well, you can see her Christmas in the morning, and then we'll come in the afternoon, evening. And I kept saying to her mother-in-law's 94 and has had strokes.
She's just a kid.
Been hospitalized and stuff. And I don't want to see her go like some of our wrestling friends. And obviously she's more important to me than, even a close friend like Danny Hodge. And so I guess I've been losing my temper, like screaming at them, like, this is insane. You guys shouldn't do this, and they just said, well, that's your opinion and we respect that, but we are going to be with her because she thinks it's safe. And I go, this is effing crazy. It's nuts. And now we have no ICU beds here. So people have to drive 2 to 3 hours to possibly even get a hospital bed in the gift shop of these hospitals. We're the epicenter now. We're New York briefly and parts of China and Italy and stuff. We're epicenters. Now it's Southern California where I'm at right now. That is the absolute hotbed. Doctors cannot keep up with it. They're burned out. It's a mess. And I don't know if you think I might have overreacted, but
Wait until New Year's. Wait until New Year's. You think
these are all super spreaders. So please, if anything else, if you have a bubble, just stay within that bubble. Try not to involve others, because now they are pretty sure the reason that it's gone out exponentially high is because that new UK variant, that new, it's like 80 times more.
We're going to be able to ever manage large crowds again? Do you think that we may go like another 5 or 6 years before people can trust being part of like a big audience again? And that's the problem. But the problem is the vaccine. Fauci has said we're going to need 80 to 85% of Americans to get this so-called herd immunity to take that vaccine, and that's you take 2 shots within 21 to 28 days apart, and only about 40% of Americans now are on board with that. You have all these Trump folks sadly drinking the Kool-Aid and believing it's a hoax, you don't have the mask, and you certainly don't want a vaccine because they have all these reasons for that besides the anti-vaxxers. So if we're only at 40%, guys, and we need 80 to 85%, it's, and they are saying like every winter we could have yet another COVID, like COVID-21 and COVID-22 the year after. So Americans, we need to get smart. Look at some of these other countries that are beating it. New Zealand is a perfect example. They've only had like 3 cases total in that wonderful country because they were smart.
I'm going to move to New Zealand.
Well, South Korea.
Of course, everybody moves to New Zealand, and guess what happens? Yeah. So does COVID.
South Korea is not doing so great.
They were.
Their numbers shot up also.
Yeah, well, it's probably these waves. They were doing great for quite a long time, and certainly better than the United States. I mean, the United States is doing piss poor, and it's because of selfish, stupid people. I'm sorry.
Well, let's try to again center this towards the future of wrestling. and maybe
Mike
sports
just
entertainment.
eliminated half of our audience.
No, but we want you wrestling folks, whether you're a worker, a ref, a promoter, a fan, we want you around. You just put on the piece of cloth over your face. I mean, you're helping other people, not just yourself, you're helping other people. We want you around. We want you around so we can argue with you over other stuff, heels and faces or angles, not over a silly piece of cloth, which can do a world of good.
I've had 25 friends with the virus, 2 dead, 4 hospitalized. Some of them were intubated. So for the geniuses who go, this is just some, work, some political deal, they're clueless. I mean, New York was devastated by this.
I just read in the New York Times, Eb, which is the Bible. I don't mean to interrupt. The New York Times is kind of the Bible for true, great information. And they had a thing on Brooklyn. They have these ice carts. They're just throwing the bodies in there. There are too many for them to identify.
It's like the plague in the Middle Ages.
It's like how many horror movies have we had over like the last 30 years where they kind of predict this? I bet Orwell and some of those guys from decades ago and longer kind of predicted this kind of thing would happen. And it's like the Twilight Zone episode where everyone suspects everyone else. We have this silent killer. Somebody could be a carrier and not know it, no symptoms at all, and kill everybody around them or spread it. It's really horrible.
So when will large audiences be trusting enough to get together like they would for wrestling shows, for music shows, for sports, for any of that? That's kind of where I'm going with this and how it relates to wrestling. When will people, because we obviously feel, I think most of us feel, that the shows without an audience are really like the worst shows that the WWE has put on in decades, and the ratings are certainly showing it. Whereas AEW is able to get a small show together, but make it feel like it's a large audience because their audience is very participatory, and they do a good job of shooting it, not showing the really large arenas that these folks are in, and doing the smaller shows with the smaller audience. The AEW guys, since they were just used to working indie shows, they're not freaked out about working in an audience of dozens instead of tens of thousands. But the WWE folks have not adjusted to that. And
neither is Impact. I think AEW is doing it the best because they have the people spread out. They're not always doing the smart stuff. The people around the ring, I cringe when I see some without mask, or it's 6 or more feet and a mask, not either or, not distancing or a mask. You got to have the mask on, and they're wrestlers and all.
Especially indoors.
But even outdoors, there was. I have an outdoor gym, and I can be on a cross trainer like 50 feet away from the nearest person early in the morning. If I get there at 5 when it's freezing cold, so I'm out there. But there was a cycling instructor, and she was probably my age, in her 60s. She keeled over the other day, and then we're hearing, it was COVID related. She had been coughing and didn't think she had it or whatever. She keeled over, the ambulances came and all that shit. It was, it hits home. You see this stuff, and it's happening all in every country. This should unite the whole world. Forget about Trump, that moron, and all of his idiotic pardons, which are so sleazy. I can't sleep at night worrying about all of this crap. But this is happening.
Emails to
every country. I don't care who you are. You think it's a work? Killer Kowalski said everything in life is a work. Well, not this thing. It is in every country. It should be uniting us. We should be united with China, with Russia, and it could be something that would bring us together. But instead, at least in this country, because Trump and all those goofballs, we're torn apart. We should be working together, red and blue.
Well, speaking of that, let's see if Steve's sound is okay. What's happening with the virus in China, Steve? No.
Maybe it's just delay.
Steve, what's happening with the virus in China?
Well, my particular city is now in its 3rd wave. There are 8 outbreaks in a city of 7 million.
All right.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Now, when you perform in China, do they do anything differently for the live audiences that you're performing for to keep it COVID safe or to try to prevent COVID?
I did a series of TV tapings where we shot 3 episodes. There was no audience.
Okay.
It's safe.
I think we're having just so many
But the
technical
last 2
difficulties.
shows. Yeah, I understand.
I think we're going to have to try to find another way to communicate with you, Steve. Really appreciate you having you on as a guest, but I think this is a little difficult with the connection that we've got. So, certainly don't take it personally.
Thanks, Steve. Sorry,
yeah.
tried.
Well, no, it's amazing Steve was on. I hope he can hear me. We're so proud of him in China. That's a huge global deal. That's about as big as it gets on a wrestling resume, and he's doing all these other things. So power to Steve.
And before we disconnect, please promote yourself and give your information so that fans can talk to you if they need to.
Yeah, plug anything you like, Steve.
Well, I'm doing a show for a new federation. We Love Wrestling, January 2nd in Anshan, China. And apparently they're doing the old Pat Patterson gimmick with me because I am coming in as champion. I must have won it in a mysterious tournament in Rio de Janeiro.
There you go. There you go.
And how can fans watch that on the internet?
Where can we see you? Where can we see videos?
It will be posted. Yes, all of MKW.
Middle Kingdom Wrestling.
If you go onto our YouTube channel, Middle Kingdom Wrestling, you'll be able to see that. Yes, that's the easiest. Everything else is too complicated with me having to spell out Hershkowitz and other.
But they can find you as Steve the Teacher, right?
Yes, correct.
Great. Hey, I'm so sorry that the technical issues are here. You've been a very wonderful guest. We will have you on in the future. Hopefully, if you can get to a solid line, we'd love to have you on.
All right. Happy New Year, Steve. Thanks so much.
Okay. Always the best. Love.
Shay. Here you go.
All right. Sorry about that, everyone. Certainly a wonderful guest, but just the technical issues too difficult.
Is the glass half full or half empty? The guy's 5,000 miles away. I think it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that tin can with string really goes a long way.
That's right.
Now, I was going to bring aboard Lance Von Erich, who's in Africa, and is co-author of his new book, Lance by Chance, which I have a lot of photos in. But
we had the author on here, Vinny Berry.
You had Vinny on. I just learned that. But Lance is in Africa, so that would have been tremendous having Steve in China and Lance in Africa. But we
could all not talk to each other and not hear each other.
Yeah,
that would be great.
But this is a wonderful book, Lance by Chance, Wrestling as Von Erich by Lance Vaughn. That's Lance Von Erich and Vinny Berry. Now, he'd actually worked the territories, as Vinny might have told you, in Portland, etc. And then he became a promoter in Africa. He did tours in Israel and other places. Has all these great stories. Bruiser Brodie, the Sean and Steve Simpson. Everybody is in this book. So if you want to learn, fantastic book. It's a little different take on the Dallas Fritz Von Erich territory. Lance by Chance. And he's got chock full of stuff. Ric Flair experiences. This is a cool book.
You got Mickey Doyle's book?
No, does he have a new book?
Mickey Doyle has a book.
Yeah, we had him on.
Yeah.
We had him on our show.
What's the book called? Is it on his life?
If you give me a second, I'll pull it out. I don't remember the title. But
I want to remember the Young Bucks.
You guys keep talking.
Here's Keith Elliott Greenbook's fantastic book on the Indies. Too Sweet, Inside the Indie Wrestling Evolution. Everybody should have these books in their library. That is the Young Bucks book, their autobiographical thing.
Don't give it to Jim Cornette for a late Christmas.
This is a good book, and I actually have a photo in it, The Rock Dwayne Johnson's photo book. He has a lot of wrestling stuff in there. One fantastic 2-pager shot, him and Roman Reigns, I think in Maui or Kauai. And I know there's WWE fans. We don't want to talk down to them. This is a great book. This is a WWE book on extreme matches. These all just came out fairly recently. I want Ev to be here when I talk about some other stuff. Dave Berzinski, I'm pretty sure you guys have had on.
No, we haven't.
Dave. He was the lead photographer at Kobo. I only came in a couple of times in Detroit, but he has 2 books. This Saturday night, parts 1 and 2, return to the Kobo. Here's the sheet against Luis Arriba Martinez. One of his cover shots. Dave is a musician. He was a heel manager, lead photographer. He helped write.
Get him on the show.
Oh,
Get him on the show.
Has he not been on the show? Because I'll bring.
No, we haven't had him.
I don't care. I'll bring Vinnie Barry on anytime. I was going to bring him on.
Well, we've had Vinnie Barry, but we haven't had Dave Brzezinski on.
Oh, Dave knows everything about wrestling. He has a fantastic, incredible wine store. Now, Ev, I want to show 2 books with Ev present. But he has one of the world's great wine stores in or near his Michigan home. Ev, I just got this today. It's a little bit late, but I was pretty close to the songwriter for Glenn Campbell, whose name
Glenn Campbell was some wrestler, boy.
Oh, what a fantastic singer! No,
yeah. He died this year, though, didn't he?
I brought him on to. Pardon, he just died. He had Alzheimer's fairly badly, but he died.
He died this year also. He was another. One of 2020.
This is a great book. Ev, look at this one. Jazz clubs of the 40s and 50s sitting in.
Wow. Wow, I'd like that.
Oh, photo book.
We have ourselves a winner.
Well, this one's pretty damn good. I mean, Vinnie Barry's book on Lance Von Erich for the wrestling and sitting in for the arts. It's got contributions by Quincy Jones, Sonny Rollins. Just great.
I used to go see Sonny Rollins every year like religion. I'd sit at the foot of the master at the bottom line, the Beacon Theater. Anyway, it's my turn. Is wrestling fixed? I didn't know it was broken. Bill Apter. Bruce Hart, straight from the heart. Our buddy Bruce Hart.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Good advice from professional wrestling. Okay, this is our friend Darren Pouchowitz. This is an interesting book. Pro Wrestling, Frequently Asked Questions, Brian Solomon, who's done our show. He also has a book on Godzilla. The guy's eclectic. Vader Time, our boy Kenny Casanova. Vader Time. Yeah,
and he wrote a great book on Kamala.
Yeah, that's right. Mike Mooneyham, Final Bell. Mike Mooneyham's awesome.
I have a billion photos in that book, Ev.
There you go. Leno's photos are in there. Second Nature, Rick. This is about the legacy of Ric Flair and the rise of Charlotte. Okay?
Who put that book
Brian
out?
Shields. Brian Shields.
Who put that? Brian Shields did it?
Brian Shields, yep. Yeah, Wrestling with Joey Licious. We had him on the show the other week. Joey Casada, colorful guy. Yeah, Michael appreciate this. John Cospa, Grappling by Gaslight.
Oh, it's a fantastic book.
When Mike and I were kids, we'd go see Gotch and Hackenschmidt.
Yeah.
We were there. 3rd row ringside. Here you go, Mike. You'll appreciate this. Everybody loves Mickey. Mickey Doyle. Mickey Doyle.
He was a great guest.
Did he
My book, Apartment 4B like in Brooklyn.
Well, you got to have that book.
And I'm finishing my my newest book. And man, let me tell you, Mike, I sat down yesterday and I wrote the piece about Johnny Valiant. It took almost 2 years to write that. It was so heart-wrenching. Oh my God.
I've read some passages from it. You've given me the privilege of reading some passages of it, and it is fantastic. I mean, even just the pieces that I've read, if you put all that together, it's going to make for one hell of a book. So,
thank you, Mike. What I'm trying to do is basically it's short vignettes, it's slices of life. It's so far removed from who was the booker and overanalyzing this angle. This really doesn't exist, and there's a piece in there. There's a piece in there how. Sometimes I'll have dreams and these guys like come to me in my dreams, Nikolai and Johnny and Nicole Bass. I was at Nicole Bass's deathbed the night before she died. I was at her deathbed. People, and some of the stories are just heart-wrenching.
Nicole had a big heart, and it always pained me when she and Joni Lauer were on Howard Stern's show. As much as I love the Stern show, they would goof on them mercilessly, and they both took it, but Nicole, you kind of knew it hurt her to be in that role, goofed on, particularly after her husband Bob died.
We had those conversations. I'd sit with her in the diner. We were practically neighbors. She was a couple of towns over from me. We'd sit in the diner, and she'd say, "I love Howard, but sometimes, I get tired of the dick jokes, and are you a guy?" And she'd put on makeup, and she'd say, "I like when I look pretty, and people compliment me." It wore on her, you look like Herman Munster and all. People are cruel sometimes.
Oh yeah, I mean that reminds me, getting back to the Mark Smith situation, and having to deal with the 9th anniversary of his death, and you knew Mark Smith pretty well, yourself, Mike. And
oh god, yeah, I shot him in all his incarnations.
From Super Destroyer, from the football hero to Super Destroyer to the Bison, he evolved in so many different ways, and yet, as I was saying last week, I was saying to on another show that I podcast, that he knew he had this time bomb ticking inside him. His grandfather had a congenital heart disease, and I found out from his mother that Mark was saying, I knew that my time was limited, and I was going to have to make the most of what I had, because I knew I was going to die early. And Mickey
Mantle felt like that, and he lived into his 60s. Everybody in his family died young. So you really never know with these things.
Wrestling is a little different. He wasn't well known. Bison Mark Smith wasn't so well known outside of his home-based promotion, APW, and then Iron, when Mike Modest and Donovan Morgan left and took pretty much everyone from APW, a la Noah, Mitsuhara Misawa, the third Tiger Mask, taking him away from All Japan when Baba died, Giant Baba. But Mark Smith had, I think, Buddy can correct me if I'm wrong, it was just like 1 or 2 tours of All Japan Pro Wrestling. But then when all those guys formed with Misawa, Noah, Pro Wrestling Noah, similar to Mike Modest Donovan's American sister promotion, Iron, he had a zillion tours for Noah. And
he found his stride in Puerto Rico, where he eventually had his son and married, and that's where he died. But he was one of the few wrestlers that I knew that could make it and live internationally just by being a pro wrestler, not by having side jobs or doing other things in the background. I
saw Bison Smith for Ring of Honor in New York a couple of times, and they were pushing him. And the guy was tremendous, and I'm jaded, and I don't just mark out for anybody. Mike knows the guy was great. Like Luke Harper, man. They basically had the same run. What was he? 39, 40?
Yeah, 41.
41. Yeah, Luke Harper's 41.
A sad number.
So he was ill, though. He had not been on an AEW show. So we're going back to our original conversation at the start of the show. And he had not been on TV in a long time. There had been no explanation. I didn't read in the sheets, not the Torch or Meltzer, a Wrestling Observer newsletter, anywhere that anything was going on. So they must have kept that quiet. But it's just
they didn't have to keep it a secret for that long. I mean, within 2 months.
Our whole world is topsy-turvy right now. And so these deaths. The year started with a great friend of mine, Pampero Firpo, who main evented at the Garden against Pedro Morales. He main evented in Boston, also against Morales, but also against San Martino. And I am so happy, again, at that 2015 WrestleMania, which is the last one I shot in San Jose, Santa Clara, that his lovely daughter, Mary, and I took Firp. Well, she and her brother really did. I met up with them at the hotel, and then we went to Hall of Fame and WrestleMania itself. But at WrestleMania, I dragged Bruno over to take pictures with Firp, and Mary got the video of it. Bruno and Pampero Firpo, the Wild Bull of Pampas, hadn't seen each other since like 1971, 72. So very heartwarming, and all these guys crowded around Firpo. Bret Hart, Nikolai. I got a shot of Nikolai with Firpo. I should send Evan. And Danny Davis, all of these.
Mike, let me just throw this in. Lanny Poffo's a dear friend of ours, and he said to me that Randy Savage was very influenced by Firpo.
Well, that's where the "ooh yeah" came from, because
Yeah.
Ferguson was doing that in the 60s and 70s. Ooh yeah, and Savage took it, verbatim, and now we've got this guy Otis in WWE that's doing "ooh yeah." So 3 generations, it all came from Ferp. But oh no, that was Randy Savage's favorite wrestler, and the Poffo family came in to work for Sheik, where Ferpa was on top, main eventing with the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher. And Lanny and his dad Angelo were the tag champions, and Randy was just Randy Poffo, going back and forth between the St. Louis Cards farm system and wrestling. And
I also wanted to not forget Shad Gaspard.
Oh God! Oh, right near me in Venice Beach.
Yeah.
Now I see that his wife, his widow, is suing the city and all this stuff. But the night before, all the newscasts said that the surf, they're going to have something called sneaker waves, very dangerous waves that could carry you out. So they were very clear that it was dangerous. You shouldn't go out in the water. And I'm not blaming him, because he was a hero. He saved his son. He's the hero of heroes. But, I see when this stuff happens, and then the family, like Kobe Bryant's widow, they sue everybody in sight. And I think it's such a horrific loss that they kind of lash out. Who can you sue? He was out there. They tried to do his best, and she's saying they didn't have enough people. It's like, you just can't sue, because it's not going to bring this hero, Shad Gaspard, back, who was one of the sweetest guys. Evan, at that 2000, hey, Russ, you'll appreciate this. He was there. He helped me out quite a bit when in the back in the dressing room, at times when Russ wasn't this Russ buddy, I was having him, he was helping me ringside as my photographer stuff, but there was shit going on in the back and all this stuff, and we knew the promoters were going to fleece out this husband and wife.
This is Wrestle Fan Fest 2007, the world's worst wrestling convention. The worst wrestling convention.
Worst fiasco I have ever seen in wrestling. I've seen a lot of rip-off conventions. Good ones, like Weekend at the Champions, my own, that Evan enjoyed, and Evan helped me tremendously with the St. Louis May 1992 Sam Munchnick 3-day weekend for the boys. But Shad asked me, how can I help? He kept asking me, what can I do? He ended up driving some of these guys. When I told you the promoters canceled all of the buses and trans back to the...
Snuka was in tears. I remember Snuka was in tears because they promised him they would pay him for his flight back, and he had no flight back whatsoever booked. And I forgot how that turned out.
Evan, they conned Nikolai into paying his flight out. They said they would reimburse him for his initial flight out. They didn't. They canceled all the guys' outbound flights, as well as the trans and the hotel rooms. So when I went in, and I don't know if, Russ, you were with me that Monday morning, after the 3-day fiasco, I
was not with you. I wanted out. I wanted to get away from that thing after I
listen to
that.
There must have been 60 wrestlers, including Don Marie, Francine, sleeping on the floors. I think Blue Meanie, Greg Valentine, Harley Race, whatever chairs, etc., were in the lobby, because they had no hotel room. These guys canceled the hotel rooms, everything on these guys. It was horrific. So Shad transed some of the guys like Snuka, and I think Harley Race and Nick Bockwinkel, back and forth. And these guys, to save money, these scumbag 2 promoters, they would book them out of like the farthest away airports. Not San Francisco, we were right at the Marriott. I think it was right at the
Cow Palace, yeah.
But they were flying them out of San Jose, mostly in Sacramento. And Snuka was out of Sacramento, like a good 2 hours away, with no money, because he also had fallen for the, pay your way out here, we'll reimburse you. It's gut-wrenching, and people that we love, and people you don't screw over any of these guys, whether it be Beefcake.
Oh, Scott Norton was ready to. I remember Scott Norton was ready to grind their bones into powder, and it took I think
the tough guys. They had the Steiners who got screwed. Scott Norton,
the Barbarian,
MMA God, the Warlord. We all protected Don Fry when the cops came for him, because that was a whole nother story when the husband and wife left with a cash box, not just for the wrestlers, but all the MMA guys. And then a fight broke out. The MMA guys were all blaming each other and fighting amongst each other. And Don Fry was wrongly accused of something when he was cold-cocked by Dog the Bounty Hunter's bodyguard. It was just, so...
13 years later, you wonder why there hasn't been a wrestling fan convention, a major wrestling fan convention.
Well, the guys that do it right, as Evan will attest, High Spots Mike Bucci, does it right with Russell Kahn, which used to be, I forget what its first incarnation. I was at that one as the official photographer for that, for the very first one, 2005. So there are ethical ones, High Spots being, the top one, and WWE does a nice job with their access stuff. So there are ethical
issues, guys.
Yeah, I think we lost you temporarily there. I mean, you think you're back. You're blinking now.
Ev, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah, before you weren't blinking. You were just staying. I thought you were fascinated by our conversation so much that you were transfixed and couldn't get a word in edgewise.
Well, that's always the case when I come on, but I better go and leave you guys to close the show, Ev, unless you or Buddy have anything to ask me. But I hope, I'm praying for a better year, a safer year for all of us. We want even.
Couldn't be much worse.
No.
Don't tell 2021 to hold 2020's beer. That's all I got to say is that, 2021 could, we didn't have a nuclear, accident or aliens haven't come down and abducted us. So, don't ask 2021 to bring those forward.
My dad was a taxi driver, and he would pick up all these celebrities in Manhattan. And whenever like two guys died, like we just had with Luke Harper and Danny Hodge, he would tell the third celebrity, he would go, "Don't get in the cab because these things come in threes."
In threes.
Yeah. So
I'm
bracing myself for the next 5 days. The year's not over yet.
Yeah, no, the problem is in the 2000s, it's not coming in threes. It's coming in like 300s, 3 millions, and that's the bad news.
Let's wish 2021, get rid of Trump. Get people to take the vaccine, get educated, wear a mask, protect your fellow sisters and brothers. Let's get rid of COVID. Let's really do our best. We need a healthy 2021 so we can go back and do all those things we want to do. The concerts, the shows, theater, we need restaurants. How many fantastic restaurants? We're losing classic F restaurants.
I lost 25 restaurants in my neighborhood in Queens, 25 within walking distance. It's just one, shuttered place after another. It's horrible. And
downtown San Francisco is a ghost town. I mean, it was the most un-Christmassy feeling to be in downtown San Francisco last week and just walking around, a place that's normally filled with streamers and Christmas trees and displays left and right, all by Union Square, which is a huge shopping mecca for San Francisco. There's nothing there. It looked like any other day.
That's where my dental office was. I would go and see all the SPCA animals up for adoption in the Macy's windows that they have colorfully done. Saks had those amazing windows. Tiffany, all those,
They're all gone now. They're all boarded up.
Neiman Marcus, Saks. It breaks my heart. San Francisco is like a mini New York. New York, those fantastic storefront windows and Bloomingdale's and all that stuff. So many amazing Christmases, and we got to get to a point of health. So everybody, please do your part. Get a vaccine, protect each other.
And let me just throw this out there, and I'm sure Mike will agree. Early this morning, I was doing yoga. I also practiced Tai Chi, Qigong, lift some weights, take long walks, exercise, build your immune system. A lot of people really don't take care of themselves.
And watch wrestling and everything coast to coast. That is a COVID-free activity that you guarantee will not get COVID from if you sit around and watch all 41 of our episodes.
And we'll depress the hell out of you with shows like tonight's.
Well,
Speaking of COVID, wait a minute, you guys. Speaking of COVID, before I leave, and I do have to leave, there were all these reports that Bill Anderson was dying and in the hospital with COVID and stuff. And he had it, and it was a rough go, but it wasn't nowhere near like that. I'm bringing him aboard. I asked you guys. So January the 16th, I think it is, that Saturday, I'm bringing Bill Anderson, who's going to talk about being a wrestler and who's done everything in the business, had a school.
Card subject to change. Subject to change.
Like tonight with Lance Von Erich, I'll take the heat for that.
The 4 magic words in wrestling. It'll get you through any show. Card subject to change. Right. I always said that in my indie days.
We'll have Bill Anderson on soon. I'll put it that way, and he'll talk about dispelling those rumors that the rumors of his death were greatly exaggerated and all the stuff he did, because he basically ran all the house shows for Vince in the 80s. from about
Mike,
80.
I have a question for you that nobody seems to be able to answer. All the legendary jobbers, how come nobody ever knows if these guys are alive or not? Is Joe Turco alive? Vincente Cometti, Moose Monroe.
Well, we know Salvatore Palomo.
guys alive?
He passed. The Continental Gentleman, Arisi, was going to have him on his show. I can't think of his name now.
Joe Turco.
Was it Joe Turco?
Joe Turco, yeah.
I thought it was another guy had just passed about a month ago. We should do that because they are just as important as the big stars in wrestling.
Nobody knows if they're alive or dead. That's
well,
kind of sad.
we lost SD Jones. I usually reported when we'd lose guys on the show. Evan and I had 1 million years. We reported when these guys would Butcher Brannigan, Joe Nova, when he would die. If somebody, even like a Pork Chop Cash, who thankfully is still alive, Al Nelson's his real name, when they're taken very ill. But these guys are just as important. I mean, we lost a guy last year, too, Mondo Lopez, who was a big-name jobber in Los Angeles.
And Iron Mike Sharp.
Yeah, Iron Mike Sharp, we lost him a while back. Not quite a jobber. He did have a little run. He was managed by the Captain Lou Albano, for a while. And
I saw Mike Sharp wrestle Backlund in the main event. I saw him wrestle Tito for the Intercontinental belt. He was a main eventer in Canada and in UWF. I mean, people just remember these guys at the end of their WWE runs. But, some of these guys had stellar careers.
Well, look at poor John Tolis. John Tolis being just kind of a neutered manager for Kurt Hennig and the Beverly Brothers in WWF. But look at the promos that guy cut, extemporaneous, no cue cards, nothing. In his heyday, he and Fred Blassie were trading state-of-the-art promos in Los Angeles.
I saw Bruno wrestle Tolis at the Garden.
Well, that was like a business meeting because Tolis was only there doing bidding for Mike LaBelle, promoter Mike LaBelle, our boss in L.A. So it was more a business meeting because it was kind of almost a squash. Bruno just puts him up on his shoulders for that finisher, which Bruno hadn't used as a finisher in quite a while. That was kind of a squash. It was hard to watch that. And John Arisi was the only guy who filmed it at ringside. So thankfully we've got that footage.
I love Tolis.
Oh, Tolis and Blassie. You couldn't do those promos now. They weren't PC where he was eating Mexican food and spitting it all over the announcers and calling it garbage when he turned heel.
Called Bruno a spaghetti bender. Those were strong words back then. Spaghetti bender.
So much of wrestling is so not PC now. It's hard to even do heel stuff because, we had so many horrific stereotypes. The sneaky Japanese guys who would throw salt, the goose-stepping German,
Harper jobs,
the Russian bad guys, the Iranian...
Black guys with hard heads. That's out of vogue now. Right? All the black guys had hard heads. They can't get away with that now.
No, that's not a finisher anymore. Earl Maynard used to, and Bobo Brazil had his headbutt, and Earl Maynard's initially was called the Coco Clop. Later, the side headbutt. It was very unusual. Side headbutt. But those were finishers. You do that, the guy was down, you pinned him. It was great. Now, the kind of headbutts are kind of coming back, but it's headbutts to the chest now because they make a great big noise. Oh, here's one last. All right, last thing before I leave. You look at WWF TV, and I'm not knocking them, they're whatever, but the camera is the most important thing. When there's a lot of light being shown where they're not connected, they purposely have this camera crew so trained, whether it's Raw or SmackDown, to go, different camera, so they don't show how many feet they're missing each other. And the other thing I hate lately that I'm only seeing in WWE is the guy pinning the other guy, pushing the guy he's pinning away, at 2. You can just see him, he's pushing him.
Yeah.
It's like so obvious he's breaking the pin. You wouldn't be doing that if you were legitimately trying to pin somebody. It is so obvious and glaring. It just throws any, whatever you call it.
Credibility.
And that's in between when they're shrinking it down so that they can fit in another commercial in the main box, and you're getting the pin in a tiny little screen that doesn't have the audio.
Like I told Terry Funk and J.J. Dillon, you have to watch NXT and AEW on Wednesdays. Please, guys, have those two shows not at the same time. Have one after the other. Something. If they have to be on Wednesdays, the two best shows of wrestling of the week, and I'm not mentioning because Ring of Honor is incredible, MLW is incredible, NWA Tuesday is incredible, but of the network, so-called network shows, Wednesday night, NXT and AEW are incredible. And last Wednesday was a pleasure because it was, one was from 5 to 7 Pacific time on DirecTV, and then the other started when the other was over. Instead of on at the exact same time, I'm running between rooms because I don't want to tape when I'm watching.
On demand, my friend. On demand. That's how you get. I'll have to teach you how to use on demand.
Well, I can TiVo it. I just don't want to. I need to write about it. So, I'm going back and forth and pausing one until I get caught up on the other. And it's kind of hard to keep the storyline. So, all right, guys.
Anyway, it's great to have you. Thank you for filling in. Thanks for your summary of the year. And we're good for this week. So hopefully we'll be seeing you on the 16th. And it's been great having you as a guest tonight.
All right, everybody, happy, healthy New Year. Kombate kudasai. Domo arigatou gozaimasu, everybody.
All right, yes. And our regards back to Steve, the teacher. We'll have him on also in the future.
Kamsahamnida to our huge Korean audience. Yeah.
And good night, everybody. Adios, America. All right, good night.